Good day. Today I will be speaking on business ethics and the code of conduct for estate agents. Business ethics is concerned with examining the moral rights and wrong decision-making by organizations. It is the study of business situations, activities, and decisions where issues of right and wrong are addressed, in the sense that the right and wrong are defined as morally right or wrong, rather than financially or business strategy. It has often been said that the primary aim of a trading enterprise is to increase long-term profitability and to advance the interests of shareholders. The overriding obligation, thus, of management and employees should be to serve the best interests of the organization, no matter what. A contrary view contends that organizations must act in an ethical, acceptable, and justifiable manner in their interactions with society, not only because this is the right approach to adopt, but because it makes good business sense for business enterprises to do so. There are many examples of organizations that have substantially benefited from excellent ethical reputations, and some that have suffered organizational prejudice from unflattering societal perceptions of poor ethical stances. The careful management of corporate ethical reputation has become an increasingly important strategic consideration for most enterprises. There are many key values essential to business ethics. These values represent the minimum knowledge that business enterprises should consistently understand and enforce, and basic ethical competencies applicable to every organizational role player, from those at the apex of the organizational pyramid to those at its base. These values constitute the starting point for the creation of organizational ethical codes, and also for the development of ethical corporate cultures. Each of these identified key values will now be individually considered. People may decide to act in certain ways, but could have chosen differently or have decided not to act at all. The value of freedom derives from among nature. Survival is the goal, and freedom is achieved when all biological human needs are met. This freedom may be obstructed by physical limitations. Humanity. This freedom envisages the self-realization of human social life and depends on mental skills, possession, rights, and social status. Mercy. Achieving justification for one's own actions where there are no limitations. This type of freedoms could either be accepted as a gift or refused. There are definite limitations determining freedom. Freedom to act. People can exist in line with their natural disposition. They cannot, for example, fly like birds as much as they would like to do so. Freedom to decide. People can, through rational thinking, choose the means leading to the accomplishment of their life's aims. These means, of course, depends on their mental, physical potential. Regarding the previous example, that people cannot fly like birds, they can, nevertheless, make use of their brains and abilities to envisage and construct a flying machine that enables them to travel through the air. Persons have different starting points and conditions. Not everyone enjoys the same social status, has equal wealth, or demonstrates the same rational and emotional and mental potential. People do possess these facets to a certain degree, and it is up to each individual to cultivate them further, in spite of the situational and constant obstacles that must be faced. Situational obstacles may occur at any certain point in time, and they may disappear, while constant obstacles such as chronic illness or permanent injury persist for a lifetime. People may be molded by the environment and society in which they are nurtured. Oscar Pistorius, prior to his criminal conviction, was able to exercise his freedom despite the severe disability of having been born without legs. He competed on almost equal terms against all-bodied athletes using his prosthetic limbs. Freedom can also be categorized into civic, personal, religious, economic, and political freedoms, all of which are guaranteed in the South African constitutional democracy, which emphasizes the rule of law. The state must treat all its constituent parts equally, despite the reality of different skills, positions, and natural ability. It must ensure the freedom of each individual. The ethical value of justice reflects the balance between an individual's personal freedom on the one hand and the obedience of that individual to the law on the other hand. Legality is a prerequisite for justice in the sense that what is legal must also be just. The ethical value of justice denotes two economic principles, namely commutative principle or the equalization of justice. Commutative justice means that all are entitled to an equal part of the goods and services of a country. It does not depend on the position of an individual within society. The distributive principle, in the sense that, for instance, those individuals earning a higher income are required to pay higher taxes. All individuals have the right to make decisions. The choices that are made can be just or unjust. Each choice made has different resulting effects or consequences. This implies that in making decisions, something will be caused to happen. The actions that are the responses to these decisions determine whether the decisions will result in the desired consequences or in unwanted, unpredictable, unintended consequences. A person having made a choice is responsible for the consequences of that choice. It is a function of ethics to convert thoughts and actions into predictable and good consequences. The right to make choices implies a commitment to accept responsibility for the consequences of that choice, whether realized or unrealized. There is also the possibility of refraining from making a choice. It should not be overlooked that there are also consequences attached to not choosing, while the responsibility is just the same. If, for example, a person is seen drowning in a lake and a bystander who could have rendered assistance chooses not to throw that person a nearby floating device, or chooses not to make a choice at all and simply walks away, this would be perceived by most people as an immoral act and might even be legally sanctioned if the death of the person is a consequence. It should not be overlooked that people are never responsible only for themselves. Each ethical responsibility, in fact, generally extends to, among others, legal responsibility or responsibility in the face of the law, political responsibility, or the civic responsibility of citizens for public administration, economic and social responsibilities, or the responsibility for enhancing the material and or spiritual wealth of society. Economic and social responsibility is important from a point of view of business ethics. This responsibility can be categorized into the following: the responsibility of the principals of an enterprise for the actions and activities of the enterprise and for its principals and employees; the responsibility of the employees of an enterprise to its principals; the responsibility of the enterprise to its stakeholders, to its customers or clients; the responsibility of the enterprise to both the country and to the society as a whole, and also the responsibility of the enterprise to the environment. There are differing points of view where corporate ethical responsibility is concerned. Namely, the enterprise is merely a legal entity and as such exercises no morality. The enterprise is an ethical subject and it consists of people. The enterprise is an ethical participant but is less than an individual and thus has less ethical responsibility than individuals. These differing views underscore the paradox of ethics and the fact that while something may be legal, it will not necessarily be ethical, vice versa. For example, the Code of Conduct for Estate Agent, an ethical code, it prescribes that a sole mandate must be in writing, although there is no legislative requirement to this effect. Trust is nurtured where individuals accept the consequences of their actions and endeavor to mitigate any negative outcomes of the decisions made. The higher the degree of responsibility, the better must be the relationship of trust between, say, the principals of an enterprise, and the higher should be the level of moral credit attaching to those persons. Responsibility and trust. are probably the key values that differentiate successful enterprise from their unsuccessful counterparts. Trust may be regarded as the relationship between a commitment and its expected realization. For example, a purchaser of a property who trusts an asset agent enterprise will be more willing to pay a deposit to be held in trust to that enterprise. A purchaser who lacks trust in an enterprise may insist that the deposit be held by a conveyancer. Progress in the ethical sense implies the qualitative improvement over time of the conditions of human existence. Although progress is frequently mentioned in the context of change for the better, progress is never only about the qualitative growth of wealth or political or economic improvement. Progress, rather, impacts the overall improvement of human condition. It is about creating conditions that enable a worthy life in terms of such factors as material security, culture, the environment, and spiritually. Development economics demonstrates a good example of ethical progress. The academic discipline of development economics seeks to understand how economic growth can be promoted by improving health, education, working conditions, domestic and international politics, and market conditions. The discipline examines both the macro and microeconomic factors relating to the structure of economies and the ways in which the economy can create effective domestic and international growth and harmony. Economic prosperity is concerned with profit maximization as measured through the gross domestic product, a measure of national income and output for the economy. GDP is the total value of all final goods, products, and services produced by the economy in any given period of time, usually a calendar year. Prosperity is better measured by establishing the level of increase in goods and better services produced by the economy, as well as monitoring improvements in purchasing power. Economic ethics seeks to achieve the best possible level of justice among all business participants in the long term. It can be deduced, therefore, that the prosperity is achieved when economic activity is beneficial to all involved and when no one pays for the prosperity of others. Should one of the subjects bear disproportionate costs for others, it is probable that the business transaction was unethical. A good example of this outcome is probably that of the mashonisa, or advancer of microcredit loans to often vulnerable people. The mashonisa may take advantage of the financial hardship of applicants to charge excessive interest on the loan. The prosperity of the creditor comes at a high cost to the debtor, who may even get into further financial difficulties from repaying the interest on the loan to the mashonisa. Prosperity does not only take a material form, it can also be ecological. If prosperity is understood only in the context of financial profit, with no regard to ecological impact, the whole of society will ultimately be obliged to bear the consequences. The continued use of carbon-based energy, for instance, results in the ongoing deterioration of the environment. The smoke that is created represents a health risk to all people who do not enjoy any benefit from it. Thus, the prosperity of some becomes an ecological burden to others. Personal prosperity should, in addition, correlate with the prosperity of society as a whole. Business enterprises must take account of both social reconciliation and the living environment. Prosperity may thus be defined as the sustainability of economic processes leading to an overall sustainability in the quality of life, whether material, cultural, economic, or spiritual, so as to ensure the well-being of all people. The concept of sustainability has become widely used in ecological ethics. It underscores the responsibility of people towards sentient and non-sentient nature and refers to the responsibility for sustained life on Earth. There are various measuring techniques for expressing sustainability in human life development, such as the Dow Jones Sustainability Index, which lists the most prominent companies and evaluates their performance in terms of social and ecological responsibility. The index is based on the analysis of corporate, environmental, and social performance, assessing such issues as corporate governance, risk management, branding, climate change mitigation, supply chain standards, and labor practices. The triple bottom line financial reporting, which is an accounting framework that measures the social environment or ecological and financial aspect of a business enterprise. The triple bottom line has been adopted by many organizations as a means to evaluate their performance in a broader perspective and also to create increased business value. Behavior may be regarded as rational if it derives from logical and proven fact-based knowledge. Rationality as an economic value is based on a logical methodology and which uses facts to make deductive conclusions. Bounded rationality, on the other hand, refers to the fact that it often happens that when individuals are required to make decisions, their rationality is limited due to the nature of their decision problem. The cognitive limitation of the decision maker's mind and the time available for making the decision. Decision makers consequently seek only a satisfactory solution rather than an optimal one, having regard to such constraints as having access only to limited and often unreliable information on possible alternatives and the consequences of those alternatives, having only a limited capacity to evaluate and process available information, and having only limited time available to make the decision. Individuals who wish to make rational economic choices may often find themselves obliged to make satisficing rather than maximizing or optimizing choices, especially in the face of complex situations. The Estate Agent's Code of Conduct contains a set of rules framed according to the principles of business ethics that guide the organizational behavior of estate agency practitioners and assist them in making sound and ethical business decisions. It provides direction and behavior that is considered to be ethical and correct or right under specific circumstances. Adherence to the Code of Conduct maintains the dignity and integrity of the estate agency sector, and it protects consumers in their dealings with estate agents. The Code of Conduct guides estate agency professions to act honestly and ethically at all times, knowing that they will not be undermined, whether financially or otherwise, by less scrupulous fellow professionals. The Code of Conduct ensures the maintenance of faith and trust by the consuming public in the estate agency sector, and that consumers will continue actively to seek and utilize the professional services and skills offered by estate agents. A good reputation is earned by estate agents who, when performing business activities professionally and with competency, honesty, and integrity, furthering estate agency sector best practices and conducting business activities in an ethical and transparent manner, respecting the confidentiality of all information received, and as well as complying fully with applicable legislative and regulatory precepts. Due to the time constraints, only Regulation 2 of the Code of Conduct will be fully explained in this presentation. Professional estate agents are, however, expected to fully acquaint themselves with and understand all the provisions of the Code of Conduct to comply therewith. Doing so will ensure that they apply sound business ethics to their practices as estate agents and reap the rewards. Regulation 2.1 of the Code of Conduct of Estate Agents prescribes the general conduct expected of an estate agent and is restricted to the actions or omissions of an estate agent in the conduct of the business as an estate agent. Despite the necessity of an estate agent observing business ethics, that person cannot be found guilty of improper conduct by reason of conduct in his private life or conduct in a business other than an estate agency business. Regulation 2.2 of the Code of Conduct imposes a general duty on estate agents to protect the interests of their clients to the best of their ability, having due regard to the interests of all other parties concerned. This clause does not impose an absolute obligation on the estate agent to protect the interests of non-clients, but an estate agent is still required to have due regard to the interests of all parties to an estate agency transaction. Regulation 2.3 of the Code of Conduct places an obligation on all estate agents to maintain the highest standard of professional conduct at all times. An estate agent must carefully apply his or her mind when, for example, expressing an opinion on the value of a property or completing standard contract documents. Regulation 2.4 of the Code of Conduct makes non-compliance by an estate agent with the provision of the Estate Agency Affairs Act or the regulations framed in terms of the Act not only a criminal offence, but also conduct deserving of sanction, for which disciplinary proceedings against the offending estate agent may be instituted. Regulation 2.5 of the Code of Conduct prohibits an estate agent from using, for say an example, a company or closed corporation or other nominee as a front to achieve objectives which would otherwise have constituted improper conduct had that estate agent acted in his or her own name. Regulation 2.6 of the Code of Conduct prohibits an estate agent from discriminating against any person, whether the seller, prospective purchaser, lessor, prospective lessee, or a property on the grounds of such person's race, creed, religious beliefs, political opinion, sex, or country of origin. Regulation 2.7 of the Code of Conduct prohibits an estate agent from pressurizing or compelling a prospective purchaser to apply to a specific bank or financial institution for the mortgage of finance. Thank you. That brings me to the conclusion of the presentation. Please remember to answer the 10 multiple choice questions in order to be able to obtain your 5 verifiable CPD points for the session.